My name is Rachel. I'm 39 years old now, and for most of my adult life, I believed something very simple, almost comforting. I believed that once you built a family, once you shared a roof, a routine, a last name, love would naturally hold everything together. I thought love was automatic. That it arrived quietly and stayed permanently. I was wrong. What no one tells you is that love isn't glue. It's more like glass. Strong when it's whole, invisible when it's working, but fragile in ways you don't notice until the smallest crack spreads across everything. Sometimes, the damage happens so slowly that by the time you see it, the structure is already failing. When I married Paul, I didn't just become someone's wife. I stepped into a role I wasn't prepared for. I became a stepmother. His son, Jake, was 15 back then, old enough to understand loss, young enough to still be shaped by it. He was quiet, withdrawn, respectful in a way that felt formal, almost distant. He wasn't rude or rebellious. If anything, he was too polite. And that politeness made me feel like a guest in my own home. I tried. I really did. I made space for him, asked about school, cooked meals I hoped he'd like. I smiled, encouraged, stayed patient. But every attempt I made to connect felt like it hit an invisible wall. A wall built long before I arrived. A wall created by grief, by absence, by losing his mother and learning too early that people can disappear without warning. Paul was a good man by most standards. Dependable. Responsible. He worked hard, paid the bills, showed up physically. But emotionally, he lived somewhere far away. After his first wife died, something inside him closed. He never talked about it, never processed it. He simply continued living, efficiently, quietly, without warmth. Love became routine. Affection became mechanical. We shared a life, but not a heartbeat. I told myself that stability was enough. That passion was something young people chased, not something grown women needed. I convinced myself that security mattered more than connection. But time has a way of exposing lies you tell yourself just to survive. Years passed, and with them came a quiet ache. A hunger for something human. Something alive. By the time Jake turned 19, everything had changed, without anyone realizing when or how. He was no longer the withdrawn teenager I first met. He had grown into a thoughtful young man, carrying his father's eyes but none of his emotional distance. He listened. He noticed things. He asked questions that went deeper than surface-level politeness. And slowly, without admitting it even to myself, I began to look forward to his presence. At first, it wasn't anything inappropriate. At least that's what I told myself. It was emotional, not physical. He noticed when I seemed tired. When I was quieter than usual. He asked how my day went and actually waited for the answer. He saw me in ways Paul hadn't in years. One evening, Paul was away on a business trip. That wasn't unusual. It was just another empty night in a house that had grown used to silence. Jake and I ate dinner together, nothing special, just leftovers, casual conversation. But when I mentioned how exhausted I'd been feeling lately, he paused and said something that shifted everything. "You don't deserve to feel alone all the time." It was such a simple sentence. Softly spoken. No drama. But it landed like a weight on my chest. No one had acknowledged my loneliness in years. No one had named it out loud. And in that moment, I felt exposed, and understood. After that, our conversations grew deeper. We talked about loss, about grief that never fully leaves, about how love can slowly cool without anyone intending for it to die. I kept telling myself it was harmless. That he was just kind. That I was just grateful. But the truth was harder to face. I was drawn to the warmth he offered so easily. Then came the night everything almost fell apart. I was half asleep on the couch, wrapped in my robe, the house dim and quiet. Jake came home late. I heard the door, felt his presence before I saw him. He stood in the doorway longer than usual, as if deciding whether to enter the room at all. When he finally sat beside me, something about him felt different, heavy, conflicted. "Rachel," he whispered, his voice shaking, "I can't take it anymore." I turned toward him, startled. "What do you mean?" He struggled to find the words. Then they spilled out. Watching me pretend everything was fine. Watching his father overlook me. Seeing my loneliness and being unable to ignore it anymore. He said Paul didn't see me, but he did. Every word felt like a mirror reflecting everything I'd been trying not to admit. My heart raced. Fear and validation tangled inside me. I knew I should stop him. Draw a line. Say something firm and final. But instead, tears welled up, because what he said was true. And when he gently wiped one from my cheek, the world seemed to pause. That moment terrified me. Not because of what he did, but because of what I felt. I stood up abruptly, shaking my head. "Jake, don't. Please." Reality rushed back in. Guilt crossed his face instantly. He apologized, said he never meant to hurt me. That he just couldn't stand seeing me in pain. I told him to go to his room. And when his door closed, I finally allowed myself to collapse into sobs. Not because something happened, but because I realized how close I'd come to letting loneliness rewrite my morals. The next morning, neither of us could meet each other's eyes. When Paul returned, life continued on the surface. But underneath, everything had shifted. Jake avoided me. Weeks later, he moved out. Years passed. One day, I ran into him at a cafe. He looked calmer, older, grounded. We spoke politely. As he left, he thanked me for stopping him that night. We both understood how close we'd come to ruining everything. That experience taught me something brutal and true. Loneliness can make good people dangerous. It whispers. It convinces you that the warmth you crave is right in front of you, even when it isn't yours to take. Love isn't only desire. Sometimes, it's restraint. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is walking away before irreversible damage is done. After Jake left, the house felt emptier than ever. Paul didn't notice. He returned to his routines. But I felt the silence echo in every room. I questioned myself constantly. Not because I wanted what almost happened, but because for one brief moment, I felt seen. Months later, a letter arrived. Jake wrote that he didn't blame me. That loneliness had broken both of us. That stopping him saved more than just a moment, it saved lives from collapsing. Paul never knew. He never will. And maybe that's how it has to be. I'm still here. Still married. Still breathing. But now I understand something I didn't before. Love without connection starves the soul. And when people starve long enough, they reach for warmth, even in the wrong places. That night didn't end in betrayal. But it came close enough to teach me a lesson I'll carry forever.